Did it surprise any of you, right? Maybe it did, maybe it didn't, that our employer engagement panel actually ended up talking about some of the most critical wraparound supports that we know all people need. It's called childcare and housing, right? And so we could go down the list of all of the wraparound supports that we know people need. And that's what we want to focus on with today's panel. We've titled this Understanding Communities, our Communities, and Supporting Individuals, because that's what this is, right? And so again, if we hearken back to the context for this work right now, and we can talk post-pandemic, and we can talk economic recovery, and we can talk racial reckoning, and we can talk the Great Resignation. There's a lot of pieces to this context, isn't there? And it all comes down to as you pointed out so eloquently, I think, Sally, this morning, is what are we doing to ensure people can put their fragmented life back together? And that really struck me. And what are we doing to ensure that people's lives don't fragment in the first place, right? And so we can talk employer engagement, mobilizing the private sector to partner with us more strongly. We can talk coordinating the public sector and community-based organizations more strongly. And ultimately, what we need to know is, what have we learned about what it takes to really support individuals in the communities and from the communities where they live and where they come from? So that's going to be the topic that we focus on. First, I do want to make sure that our panelists have a chance to introduce themselves in full. And so I'm going to start actually with you, Joe. Joe McFerrin with Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center, right? These are centers all over the country. Very excited to have you here. And then we'll move down and hear from Pat and Shari. And then we're going to hear from Matthew Romero from Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council. So I'll start with you, Joe, if you can tell us a little bit about your organization and the work that you do.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is Joe McFerrin, President and CEO of Portland OIC and the Rosemary Anderson High School. First, a little bit about me. Born and raised here, proud graduate of Grant High School, and also a graduate of Portland State University, where I had a Bachelor of, give it up. Bachelor of Science in Political Science and a Master's in Public Administration. A little bit about our organization. That long name, Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center, is a national organization, and it's all about workforce development. We started here in 1967. Working with predominantly African-American families in the community, all about getting people back to work or getting their first job, training up, placing them. Most of our money support was from the federal government, Department of Labor. That money dried up in the mid-'80s, as some of you may have been a part of. And then we got into alternative education. You look at us today, we have 4 high school campuses, 1 middle school. We work with 7 school districts throughout Multnomah County. And our workforce development focuses on young people for the most part, although we do also provide reentry services for those that have been in the system. We focus on the first job. We have a few career pathways that we've been able to launch successfully: pre-apprenticeship, construction, and the other would be our newest venture is culinary arts that we're excited about. We have about 167 employees, and we place approximately 150 to 200 participants each year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pat?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pat Daniels, and I'm the Executive Director for Constructing Hope. We are a pre-apprenticeship training program. Constructing Hope was established from a church, Irvington Covenant Church. I want to say back in 1995, this church saw that there was a problem with gentrification at that time. We saw African American men selling drugs in Northeast Portland. When we went out and talked with all of them, we found that everybody had a felony background. And with that felony background, at that particular time, the state of Oregon did not ban the box. Excuse me. And when I say ban the box, I was in the HR department, and that meant that whenever you applied for a job and you had a felony, you had to check a box. When you checked that box, that meant that we moved your file immediately to the garbage. We didn't look at your application. It was never going to move forward. So these men were just left to find the best way they could to survive. The church decided to do some research and find out who would employ these people. And what we found was the construction industry was the only, I want to say that again, the construction industry was the only place that did not have a box where you had to check if you had a felony background. So we started to work to say, how could we help these people change their lives? We started a pre-apprenticeship training program. That pre-apprenticeship training program was established in 2007, and this year we're celebrating 15 years. We started, thank you, we're chasing Joe. With this workforce, we saw that as we were working with formerly incarcerated men, we opened our doors when we became Constructing Hope. We moved from the church location to Church Street and Martin Luther King Boulevard. And at that point, when we had a storefront, we found that there were many low-income people who had not known anything about construction. So they began to walk through the door saying, hey, do I have to have a felony background to enter this program? And you know, that says a whole lot about what people knew about the construction industry. We're not in the schools. This was not an option for most people, and most people didn't know about it. It was for us a secret society that we call the FBI. We called it the FBI because when you looked at construction, it was only open to fathers, brothers, and in-laws. We were not fathers, we were not brothers, and we were not in-laws. So we had to create our own, open the doors for us to enter. And so again, Constructing Hope started, and we looked at how we were going to serve people, and that's where support services came in for us. We had to look and see that if we're going to enter this industry, it was more than just training. The training has to go beyond just the 10 weeks of training that we provide at no cost. That is 50% hands-on and 50% in class. So when we started back in 2007, we started with 3 classes a year with 10 to 12 people. I'm going to end right here. We are today offering 4 classes a year with an average of 25 people per class.
Thank you, Pat.
Well, first of all, I would ask if we could potentially get our clock reset, because looking at Wrap It Up is very intimidating for us as the speakers. So I don't know if whoever's on the clock, oh, there we go. And they could take the Wrap It Up down until it's time. That would be helpful. Thank you. I'm sorry, I can't help but do the multiple things at once. So why am I sitting here? Well, a couple of reasons. One, for 5 years, I ran Dress for Success Oregon, which is a women's workforce development organization. An organization that really looked at how can we help women, adult women who have been unemployed and underemployed, get back into the workforce. And some of the work that we did there really spoke to some of the things we've talked about today. One of the projects we did was a project in conjunction with a former company that was here in Portland called Treehouse, which was trying to figure out how we could get women through apprenticeship learning model into entry-level tech jobs, such as coding. It was an innovative program. It took money and it was risky. I can't say we graduated a lot of people from the program, but I can say we learned a lot. The people who did graduate had their lives transformed. We had a woman who had only made $12 an hour all of her career, and by the time she came through the program and got employment, was making $50,000 a year. It's more money than she ever made. That changed her life, her son's life, and who knows down the line. But what it also did was it put me in contact with some folks from Microsoft Philanthropies who were very interested in the program. And when I left Dress for Success, I ended up working for Microsoft on a innovative grant program that was designed to get money to Black and African American led nonprofits working in tech skilling. They liked the model and they wanted to see how they could do something like that. So you look at this support and you say, oh, it only helped these many people there, but it was a genesis of something that ends up helping 50 nonprofits around the country with $15 million, right? So you can't really, it's hard, especially for nonprofits when we're trying to invest in something innovative. You know, it seems like you're held to higher standards than other people. Other people just seem to waste money innovating, but you know, we need the opportunity to innovate these wraparound services. The other piece I bring is, as a consultant, I'm working with Work Systems Inc. Here in Portland on a white paper and a pilot around childcare. So I put together a task force of community members, people who work in childcare, business community, and did a survey of what was available in the state around childcare and looking at different regions and what we might do. One thing became clear: there's a lot of need. There are some pilots and things going on the provider side, meaning those who provide the care, but it is not coordinated. And coordination is one of the things that we have talked about. And then of course there's the folks who use childcare, the parents or guardians who interface. They were also indicating they don't have a good, clear path to what's available. And the childcare issue that we found that you know came out was that it didn't matter what your income. Childcare is a mission critical factor. It either plays into unemployment for women or underemployment. And back to the, you know, how do we have full use of our workforce for different positions? That underemployment shows up. And then so those are my areas. And then I just want to, you know, Pat saying FBI, I mean, this thing about the trades, that the trades hired people with backgrounds, just not Black people. So, you know, what Pat is doing is trying to say, how do we utilize already existing systems to bring in people of color who were excluded from even opportunities that they could have had. So I just want to amplify that because I just.
Thank you, Shari. And we're going to go virtual now, and Matt Romero, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, your organization, and your role.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Matthew Romero. I'm with the Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council. We're about 120 employees big. We're a council of governments. We're known in our community for our work around public transportation in 3 counties. And our economic development team is instrumental in the disbursement of ARPA funds and local funds. We have a great youth program that operates an alternative education program in partnership with our local high schools that provides you know, wraparound services for GED attainment. We have a terrific adult education and training department, and that's where I work in. We're about 6 FTEs big, and we operate out of our local WorkSource center. So we provide retraining, we do post-secondary education, wraparound services to those in transition to new careers, as well as reentry. We also work with Deer Ridge Correctional Facility to help our returning citizens with employment needs, provide on-the-job training opportunities, as well as adult, you know, work experiences, as well as apprenticeship opportunities in the trades. And we also spend you know, a lot of our time working with Oregon tradeswomen. We are heavily involved in the Hard Hat in Hand apprenticeship program here in Central Oregon. That's in partnership with our local electrical, plumbing, and pipe fitting unions. This is through Fortis Construction, and they operate out of the big Meta, you know, data centers out here in Prineville. Our position, you know, that what we do with these participants is we provide the wraparound services with transportation, with clothes, with tools, whatever they need to be supported, you know, in their apprenticeship. You know, we work with Central Oregon Community College, you know, in transitioning their, you know, graduating students, which has been terrific. But one of the programs that we're really excited that we just launched is called our Ready to Hire Accelerator. And this is a program where we've partnered with our local homeless shelter and to provide on-site employment services, as well as like a 2-day hands-on course to improve their resumes, cover letters, you know, we address tech barriers and give them a place to practice their interviewing skills. we've actually incorporated our services into their intake process to great effect so far. We even created a new bus route to get our participants back and forth to our trainings with the hope of creating a permanent on-site employment center inside the shelter post-COVID. Our team, we're only 6, but we are mighty. And during the pandemic, there was only 4 of us operating out of 3 counties and 6 sites, including, the Warm Springs Reservation, where we have 2 dedicated staff. We're really proud. You asked about our good work and what we're doing. We signed 50 on-the-job trainings this last year, as well as 60 scholarships to help people. We had 17 work experience contracts, and 14 of them were on our Warm Springs reservation. And we are very proud to say out of those 14, that 14 were successful in transferring to future careers. So that's a little bit about what we're up to. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Matt. So I just want to make a few synthesis comments, and then I want to turn another question to you that I think we have started to answer, but we want to dig a little bit deeper. First of all, I want to say, we talk about how to reach individuals, make sure that we're giving them the supports that they need as they're getting training and education, staying in a job, et cetera, right? And what this conversation, though, is also really about is what is the unique value add and role that community-based organizations play. And I think this panel is demonstrative of the very different types of community-based organizations that are in our communities, right? I mean, what you just described, Matt, is a lot. I mean, to be fair, that's a lot, right, that you're doing, playing the role of intermediary, sort of identifying the gaps and then filling the gaps with whatever that might be. I think knowing the populations and knowing the barriers, which I think Joe and Pat, you both described, that other organizations, well-intentioned as they are just not going to fully understand. I think, Shari, your description of sort of this ripple effect too, right? That is so important if we're really going to reach and scale up. So all of those things, I think, matter. What I want to dig into a little bit more is tell us more about what is the value add and the role that gets played, really digging into not every organization can identify and fill the gaps that are needed. How do we lean on and use community-based organizations more who really do bring that value and play some of those roles? So comment a little bit on role and value add and how we make better use. Joe, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. First and foremost, at our organization, Portland OIC, we pride ourselves in serving people who have fallen through the cracks. So our schools are designed for students who are not succeeding in the public school system. And most of our services are catered and designed for people that have multiple barriers, including criminal background histories. The first value add piece to achieve success with our participants begins and ends with the relationship. Without the relationship, without the trust, it is very difficult for any organization to get people who are full of despair and traumatized to take advantage of the services so many of us offer. And so it starts there. Our entire organization is built around building that relationship and building trust. And then once we put them into an opportunity, we must allow space for them to fail. So they fall, we got to pick them back up and keep them going. So the support is ongoing and it's very long term. On my way here today to through the parking lot, the parking attendant saw my lanyard and she said, "Oh, you're with Rosemary Anderson High School?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, my son went to Rosemary Anderson High School." I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, how is he doing?" And she said, "He's doing fine. He's working at Serendipity, a school for young people with severe disabilities." And I said, "Well, do you have a picture of of your son. She showed me the picture, and I remembered her son. He attended our East Campus and participated in our workforce programs. And here's a kid, one of many, that looked like he wasn't going to make it through high school. My mail person who delivers our mail to my home is a former trainee of POIC. My mother passed January 29, 2022. And when I took her to the hospital, to emergency, and those big doors opened up, the first person that I bumped into was a trainee of Portland OIC and a graduate of Rosemary Anderson High School. And these relationships run deep, and they last a very long time. And so to sum up an answer to your question, it's a long-term investment. It's meeting our participants where they are and working with them to remove any and all barriers that they may face. And that is the value of an organization like POIC and Constructing Hope. And the last thing I will add, that many of our employees are from the community and look like the participants that we serve, and many of them have similar backgrounds. So those are just a few of the keys and the values that community-based organizations bring to workforce development.
Thank you, Joe.
I think Joe said it all, but what I'm going to add to that is when we looked at assisting formerly incarcerated, the need for low income is the same. When Constructing Hope put our program together and we decided, what is it that we're teaching? And we decided that what we're teaching is work ethics. Also, what we're teaching is skills, and I heard a lot of people talk about soft skills, and soft skills are missing. And especially if you've been incarcerated. And today, the average person is incarcerated for 8 years. When we did 2 strikes and you're out, I don't care if you stole a candy bar. You got 8 years. Can anybody think about where they were 8 years ago and what were you doing? So think about that time, and now you're coming out, cell phone, everything's changed, and now the whole world has changed. And you're supposed to find a way to survive with nothing. So we also added to that soft skills and hard skills. So we're going to make sure that you know how to budget. We're going to make sure that you understand the math that you're going to need to go into that trade. We made sure that everything that you're doing in these pre-apprenticeship training programs is designed for you to be successful. We talked to you about the physical and mental toughness. Yes, you're going to experience racism. We're going to talk about that. But what we're going to do is we're going to help you move past that, because that is a barrier to your career. We talked to you about life outside of work. You've spent 8 years, and now, you know, right now, marijuana is legal. It's a whole bunch of things that's legal and things that people are doing. But is it legal in the construction trades? No. So we have to talk about life outside of work. We talk about being persistent. If you're in the construction trades or if you're in any career, how bad do you want that? How far are you willing to go to make that happen? So you have to make a commitment yourself to what it is that you want to achieve and allow us to be there to help you make that happen. The last thing we talk about is choices. It was a choice that you came through the door, and it's a choice for you to be successful. So when Joe talked about we require, not ask, we require long-term relationships, because it's the long-term relationship that's going to take you to where you want to be as far as being in the trades. There's a career there, and the options are so broad. I can tell you in the last 15 years, I have 10 people who have become contractors. Were those opportunities available to them prior to coming through Constructing Hope? No, they were not. But it's the support services that we provide and the wraparound support that we give to you to say that we want to support you with whatever it is that you're going to need to be successful. So we're going to help you take those classes that you need to take to move to that next leadership position, because in the trades, nobody's asking you if you want to move up. You have to be assertive and show them and ask and promote for yourself how you want to move up. I'm going to say that I think that it is about relationships. Because the relationship that Joe and I have, we're also part of a consortium. We are not the only pre-apprenticeship training programs here in Portland. But this consortium came together because of who we serve, and we were better together than we were apart. So Oregon Tradeswomen, one of my #1 partners, they promote women only. When Construct and Hope started, we promoted men only. But today, do we also have women in our program? Yes, we do. We have formerly incarcerated, and we also, Constructing Hope also targets homeless people. So the services that we provide in all of these programs are to make sure that people are successful in the end. And mentoring is another huge piece of that when we think about support services. Mentoring is an ongoing part that in order to be successful in the trades, someone has to be there to help you work through those hard times. So we have case managers and we have job developers that work specifically with our target population. One, once you complete the training, to walk you through the door of the trade that you're going to enter, and to support you through those 2 to 4 years that it's going to take for you to become a journey worker and beyond. So I'll stop there.
Thank you.
You know, from my perspective, I think that we need to center community-based groups and in this process and fund community-based groups at an appropriate level to be real partners and help them be the translation point between workers who historically would not be in this industry or in this environment, and the difficult interface they might have with employers who are not used to or have not had this population. The community-based groups can be a fulcrum, a really important piece, but frequently they're pushed to the sides or they're just seen as an addition. But I think that community-based groups are what really makes it work, and primarily is because, as has already been said here in different ways, is that community-based groups have the ability to speak to the population in their language, literally and figuratively. So if it's a Latinx, Hispanic organization that can speak to people in their language, if it's Hmong or Laotian who can speak to people in their language, if it's Ukrainian, here in Oregon we have a large Ukrainian population who can speak to people in their language, or if it's cultural or gender-based. At Dress for Success, what we found was that women had very different stressors around work than men did, period. And they were uncomfortable having those conversations with people who they did not feel understood that. So things like, I gained weight, I don't have the proper pants or skirt, which may seem trivial to somebody, is really problematic for somebody showing up at work. Or age-based discrimination. Women endure age-based discrimination at a significantly higher rate than men. We ignore it, it's quite shameful, nobody talks about it. They're not gonna talk to someone at a workforce organization about it. That people are just very uncomfortable. And so having this support that they can talk to, that can address and can figure out the issues with them helps people keep jobs. And that is part of the workforce pipeline. And it doesn't seem like it on the face of it, but it is. And then literally, the community-based organization can function as a partner in the training. These folks have training built in, but there are other community-based partners that don't have training built in, but can act as an adjunct. For instance, with our technology program, well, we didn't do the training. Treehouse did the tech training, but then we had a separate session for the women to decompress about what went on, what didn't work, and then we acted as a communicator between Treehouse and our women, right? Constantly reinforcing, in a reinforcement sense, the work, the support, the norms, the difficulties, making sure that that happened. And so, you know, to my mind, I don't think community-based organizations are utilized to the extent they could or should be when talking about the workforce pipeline.
Thank you, Shari. And Matt, before you answer this question, I really appreciate where that just went, because I think we're talking about the value add that unique community-based organizations play in knowing and understanding the subtleties of culture, of gender, of language, of the communities that make up our economy, right? Our regional economy. And ultimately, this is about how are we making sure people can participate wholly and fully, right? And so I appreciate that where you also took that, Shari, is we're not using the experts in this enough. We are not utilizing the community-based organizations who intricately know what some of the hidden and invisible barriers are. And so how do we make sure that we're centering and building capacity around that so that our whole workforce system, right, is operating at a whole new level? So Matt, I'd love you to take it from there. Tell us more about the role and value add from your organization in Central Oregon.
Sure. In Central Oregon, we recognize that apprenticeships, they are the access point, really, for long-term, good-paying positions that really transform, the lives of our target populations. What we've done, as I mentioned before, is partnering, with the Hard Hat in Hand apprenticeship program, with that terrific pipeline, with Fortis and the meta sites. We also, I always love plugging Oregon tradeswomen. They are just a terrific organization, and that we love working with and sending our clients through. In the past, we've participated in multiple apprenticeships with Central Oregon Community College in the tech industry. As we speak, we're supporting a number of individuals in plumbing, electrical, and HVAC apprenticeship programs, and we are with them, side by side, providing those support services, the tools, the clothes, the transportation. And for anyone out there who's had the opportunity and the pleasure to work with, people in apprenticeships, those first 2 years, I think a lot of people underestimate how difficult they are. With the after schooling hours, with the physicality, there's a lot going on. And our organization is proud to work alongside with them, providing coaching. I love the reference to soft skills, and I do agree with you that, and stepping in to help where needed, but also to help them financially to get through that first 2-year hump. We are proud to say, in Central Oregon that, right now we have 5 apprentices going through Oregon tradeswomen, and 3 of them are, out of our tribal members. Like, we are so proud of that. Our Hard Hat in Hand. We have a tribal member now who has who's in a full apprenticeship over at the meta site. That's why we do what we do. I think a big piece to your question, for us, is just how do we coordinate funding? How do we utilize, the resources of our other community partners? I always want to give a shout out to our STEP providers. For those who are on SNAP benefits, that's a huge part of our, assisting, our region. Our other partners that we are constantly working with, aside from Central Oregon Community College, our local homeless shelter, Bethlehem Inn, our local DHS office, they are the ones that are, for our program, they're sending us those consistent, good referrals, as well as what we receive from, Deer Ridge and, vocational rehab. I would say, prior to the pandemic, we were providing services to adults in custody. We helped them, with their IMAT registration and job searching, and we're doing skills-based assessments. And for a lot of our clients, we had work lined up for them, upon release, which we're proud of. But COVID halted that, but we're about to do it again, which we're excited about. We have doing that with OED, and we have a dedicated staff member on site now. But it's worth mentioning, as I'm sure my other panelists will agree, that COVID forced us to pivot hard, real hard. And for us, within a week of the shutdowns, we had to take our entire adult services team under the leadership of Tammy Bainey. We had to move 100% virtually and still provide services to our customers. It's worth mentioning for us that this past year was our busiest year since the recession in 08 and 09. We pivoted to meet the needs of our customers. We were literally out there meeting them in parking lots. We were meeting them in parks. We were doing drive-through job fairs and handing out PPE to our local businesses. And there was no rule book for how to go forward with that, and we just had to do it. We conducted everything virtually, our OJT interactions, all our meetings and interviews, and we were doing rapid response to thousands of our local businesses, providing them with the information for unemployment and for their employees on how to access, the health insurance marketplace, all just doing cold calls. And we are proud to say that we were the first in the state to provide a virtual rapid response, during the pandemic. And I'm sure we'll talk about this some more as it comes up, but it changed a lot of things. So
Thanks, Matt.
That's where we're at the moment.
And actually, Matt, I'd like to stick with you, and then we'll hear from others too. But on that question, because just in a short answer, if you can tell us, you've already laid the groundwork here. You said during the COVID pandemic, we had to pivot hard. We all did,
Yeah.
right? It was such an enormous upheaval. What would you say you have learned about how to better serve individuals in your community doing the work that you do as a result of the past 2 to 3 years?
That's a great question. Some of the things that we've learned as we're just watching just what feels like a shift in everything, for us, we saw a huge uptick in everything, our scholarship inquiries, our training requests. For us right now, it's waitlisted. And, what we're learning, unfortunately, is that this demand for retraining, it just far outweighs the state and federal funding dollars that we have. We want to do more, but that's where we're at. I would say we learned that you need to maintain those strong local partnership relationships. Like they're a necessity. For us, that's keeping that up with our local chambers, EDCO, our local workforce business team. And during that time, we signed over 50 contracts in the middle of a global pandemic still. We saw and are still seeing a huge uptick in on-the-job training requests in our region. And the reality is that employers now, they're hiring individuals that don't meet the job requirements, but they're willing to train them. We've learned that there's been a big shift in hospitality in our region, and that shift has been going towards healthcare, towards higher paying jobs with benefits. People are that's what they want, and they should want. We have seen a mammoth increased need for support services related to rent and mortgage assistance. A lot of the traditional agencies in the past that have been able to help with that, they're tapped out. And so it's for us, this has been critical to ensure the success of the programs that we're putting people through. But I got to tell you, families and single income households are struggling right now. They're struggling to pay rent and utilities, and the more funds we have to be able to just step in and give them a reprieve during that has been, again, just pivotal to the success of our clients. We're talking about future ready and things that that we're asking for help with. For our region, I would say it's to better support our apprenticeship participants, being able to support them with the tools they need, to be able to support them with the clothes and transportation. That's a terrific way to help. And it's been mentioned by the other panelists, but I think our vulnerable populations, or one of our vulnerable populations that I think was really hit hard during the pandemic, was our returning citizens. We need to reduce the recidivism rate. We need more funds for our justice-involved background folks. And I think utilizing our on-the-job trainings to set them up for success when they come out is paramount. We need this from Future Ready, and I would say, let's invest in our OJT programs, because we have seen profound success from our small business employers. And it's also great to offset the expense of training new employees. And the last thing I'll say to that question is the need for scholarships is critical. Having to go to work and to go to school is difficult enough, and throw in raising a family. And the scholarships that we provide, they do bridge that gap. And I have to say that most of our participants wouldn't be able to do it without our state and federal help. So,
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So obviously major implications, I think, on how Future Ready actually gets used and positioned to fill gaps that are deeper than they have ever been before. So I'd like to ask our panelists to also answer this question. What have you learned? And then also, if you can touch on what you think the implications are for Future Ready Oregon. I want to just prep the audience too. In about 3 minutes, we want to hear your questions and also your learnings and implications. So please be ready to grab a mic in a few minutes.
Yeah, for me, I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, when I was running DRUS, a couple of things. One is that when you pivoted, we did pivot to virtual, and then what was clear is that clients didn't have the technology. So we had to get tablets, we had to get people to understand, to work on how to use the tablets. There's a hidden thing here, which is that a large number of households actually don't have access to technology beyond a phone or potentially a smartphone. And utilizing a tablet is very different than utilizing a phone. And so that was a big gap right there. The other thing that has become clear as it relates to women post-pandemic, two things. One, women made up the majority of essential workers. So they were on the front lines, and yet they did not have adequate childcare because childcare was decimated by the pandemic due to concerns about transmission of illness, the small nature of neighbor or home-based centers and others. And so even if you could have funds, it was difficult to find childcare. And that childcare system has not bounced back. The childcare system has lost people who figure, well, I don't have to deal with this and I can go work at this other place and make $16 an hour. I'm not coming back there. And so, and then I think the third thing is that women writ large lost a tremendous amount of ground during COVID. It's easy to look around and think, oh, I have a good job, I have education, women are doing great, they're just equal to men. That is not true. And it hides the face of poverty, which is female. It hides a lot. And so what that means going forward is that Future Ready is going to have to think about in the same way we think about culturally specific solutions, we're going to have some gender specific solutions. And those gender specific solutions will include issues of childcare. Now, not all women have children, but my opinion, I don't have children, but at some point, somebody's kid's going to take care of me when I'm old. So I look at a more cooperative, sense of childcare, right? So in that regard, we all should be concerned about childcare. And so, Future Ready Oregon must address this childcare problem because it's impacting low-income women, it's impacting essential workers, but it's also impacting women who've lost gains in the workplace toward seniority, toward advancement, toward their 401k development. So, and that keeps slipping, we can find ourselves slid back. So it's very important. And then, centering the voices of the organizations who are connected to these populations to work with the employers, because employers are consistently saying, these folks get to my office and I don't know what to do with them. Well, okay, this is an equity conversation, this is a cross-cultural communication conversation, it's a complicated conversation, but utilizing the skills of the community-based organizations to separately work with employers to almost prep them and work with them for a successful launch of these folks into the workspace. So, those are some of the things that I've saw, and these are the things that I think we should focus on.
Thanks, Shari.
Okay, I had to write down a lot, and I think digital divide was the very first thing that I can say. We are working with formerly incarcerated men, and it was really hard. We had to create a whole 2 days of training prior to starting our training. And so as you speak about, it's hard to do training on your phone, and that was something that was huge. I think that for us, it was really the partnerships. It was partnerships that saved us, because when I say saved us, I think most people think that nonprofits have all of this money. And when this happened, Constructing Hope lost all of our staff. We had 2 people. We didn't make a big deal about it because it was, you have to go to work. So our staff grew from 2 people to 10 people. That was a big, heavy lift, in addition to changing your training program. So I want to go back and say, we're looking to fund new programs. I think you need to look carefully at how you're funding your existing programs, because we can't make it without funding. In that, I want to say that career mapping, when I look at how we are not looking at, everybody talks about, we have this aging workforce, but how is the aging workforce being replaced? How are we mapping out careers? Because what I've seen is a cutoff. And so we talk about the fathers, brothers, and in-laws in the construction industry. We need to look at every industry, because these same systems exist in all of these industries. So why is there a gap between the upper management and the pipeline to moving to upper management? So normally, I want to say in a perfect situation, there's an HR systems that's in place that help people move within the company, and I don't see those anymore. So the one thing about construction is it's pretty clear, and the one thing that has helped us grow is those relationships. And having those relationships, we have the career pipeline to help grow our folks from one step to another. Yeah, so I would just say that it was the support services, and really when we look at housing being the #1 issue, part of what we're doing in pre-apprenticeship is we're addressing first-time housing as we partner. And when we say, who are your partners? We're partnering with housing agencies, so that as we're working with the low-income community, there's that sweet spot on when you need to buy a house. And it's all the things that your parents, or some parents taught us that knew that, and others that didn't know. We don't know what we don't know. So community-based organizations are really filling the gap on all of the things that your parents didn't tell you, to help you grow in this society and support you along the way. Where there's potholes that you can fall in, we can help you maneuver that to be successful. So we're providing a workforce for the agencies that we're working with. And so I would say for construction, we're the ones that's providing that diverse workforce to help grow the industry with their extreme need for workers.
Thanks, Pat. Joe, final word, and then please be ready with questions or comments.
Yeah, I would echo all that our panelists have said. I would say one of the things I learned and appreciate are funders, like the Oregon Youth Development Division, Brian Detman's here, Work Systems, Inc., local foundations, corporations. They allowed us to flex and use our funds in a totally different way so that we could respond. But what I'd really like to highlight is what I learned as CEO of Portland OIC and the Rosemary Anderson High School was the need to focus on our employees. Not only were our participants facing these challenges that were brought by the pandemic, but our employees the same. And I learned so much about the things that they were going through and the challenges they were facing as they were trying to provide services to people that they cared so much about. And as a result of that experience, we've created a whole new division for staff, just staff support. How do we support the people who are working every day with the people that are facing so much trauma? And I think for me and our organization, that is probably, in addition to the things that have been previously stated, I think that that's something that will benefit our organization, benefit our staff, benefit our participants for many, many years to come and ultimately lead to better outcomes.
That's great. Thanks for bringing that up, Joe. How do you support your own staff to be able to support this important work? So I'd love to turn it to all of you just in the last 10 or so minutes that we have here. What are you hearing? What are you experiencing in your communities and your work related to being able to better support individuals in your community? Or what questions do you have? Again, can't really see you, so stand out. Thank you. There we go.
Thank you. Yes, in light of this 3D mobile phone phase out, as we're talking about support, wraparound support and support services for our community members looking for workforce training, are there funds set aside already in the $200 million for this specific purpose in connection to the technology support for this population?
Do you want to take
I
a stab
do
at that,
not
Shari?
have an answer for that, but we could
I
get
don't have the answer
for the
to that
future ready. Yeah.
question, but I would certainly hope so. I mean, I would be surprised and shocked if this level of support, Future Ready, doesn't help address the issue that you raised. I'm confident that our leaders will make sure that we'll be able to take care of that for our participants.
Well, and
Agreed.
I definitely think it's something that this is what today is about, of surfacing these issues and surfacing these things so that we can make sure that they're included as we look at those areas. And I do believe there is also some discussion in there around access, internet access for rural communities also. So because it's a multi-pronged issue, right? You have people who don't have the physical technology, and then you have people who are in places where they don't have the internet capability. So,
Great
Yes,
question.
exactly, because what comes with the accessibility bridging of this is also the broadband internet services and the signal towers, the additional signal towers that need to be everywhere. You know, in rural communities, in our Native American communities, in inner city neighborhoods where we are already stretched to provide food, to provide transportation access, transit, access to go to work, to go to training, to go to school, for childcare. And we already know that right now we have energy crisis, shortage of fuel, which the president has already released some of the fuel reserve to offset that. But then at the same time, we're helping Europe with their energy demands that has been met by Putin's Russia and obstructed by the war, Putin's war, right? So we have overall prices increases and cost of living increases that factors into this bridging of accessibility. And so I would like to remind all of us let's all make sure that we have set aside funding in that $200 million that we got for all these things. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Other questions out here? Yes, we have one in the middle. Great.
Hello, my name is Paul Paz. Quick question. How many of you here have ever worked in a hotel, restaurant, lodging, tourism industries? Hands high. You've all worked in that. How many of you currently work in that industry? I want to thank the people from WorkSource right here. Ricky? Where'd my friend go? He left. Who else do I have? Wendy Popkin. These folks, Wendy is actually originally from the Oregon Hospitality Foundation, but she connected me with WorkSource with Ricky, who connected me with Robert Brown. I'm a career waiter. I do training for staff in Oregon and all over the United States. But I really want to counsel you, reach out to WorkSource. You might have to let your fingers do a little walking and a little internet work, but it helps. Matthew from the Central Oregon. I thank you so much for recognizing what the hospitality and the leisure industry provides to the economy of the country and jobs. We got about 20,000 openings. We would love to train you. On some of the slides today, there was a lot of comments about soft skills, essential skills. Well, most of us, especially if you were young, you got those skills in our industry. As generations roll over, we are really anxious to get a hold of your children, your grandchildren, so that we can train them to take your jobs. Thank you, WorkSource, for putting this event on.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I mean, part of what we want to discuss here, right, and we will get into this in the next panel and in the closing panel, is really what are the implications on how this money will be spent. So the access to technology, what we really learned during the pandemic, Sally, hearkening again back to one of your comments, that COVID exposed what was already there, right, but exacerbated it to such a level. And so no doubt the access to technology is a huge piece. We have heard repeated over and over the detrimental effect of the pandemic on leisure and hospitality, and also the huge opportunity to really train some of these workers in other positions as well while we're rebuilding that sector. So many common themes. I know there's another comment right in the middle, so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Lisa Bisinovich. I'm with the Oregon Bioscience Association. So we represent the life science industry here in the region. First of all, I just love that you all are part of the conversation today. I've got a lot of experience prior to coming to Oregon with working with nonprofit partners and helping transitioning workers move into the life science industry. I would say, here in Oregon, we have the employers, they're hiring, they're committed to that diversity, equity, and inclusion when it comes to their workforce. But what we're trying to figure out with our committees and our groups is how do we connect in with more folks like yourselves? With me being new to Oregon, it's a particular challenge for me in that role, and so that's the challenge that we're trying to solve.
Great, thank you. What I think read into that a little bit too is the implications on this opportunity for you all in Oregon of really building those relationships with other organizations and entities, not duplicating the wheel. I think somebody said, make sure you understand which existing organizations, which existing programs are doing the right work before we create new ones. But I think similar to your point, how do you connect with the right organizations and partners at the right time to do this work? We are wrapping up. So I appreciate very much your participation. I appreciate very much you panelists. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining virtually. We know you couldn't be here. We are about to welcome the governor, and so we are going to give our panelists a warm thank you, and we will transition.